The dining room smelled of roasted turkey, cinnamon-spiced cider, and Grandma's famous apple pie cooling on the counter. Outside, snow fell in soft curtains against the frosted window panes, muffling the world beyond. Inside, our family gathered around the long oak table, the same one my grandfather had carved with his own hands decades ago. It should have been a warm, comforting night, the kind of Christmas people post about with glowing photos and forced hashtags. But under the surface of holiday cheer, the tension was so thick I could taste it. Mom sat at the far end, arranging her wine glass as though it were an art piece. Dad's jaw worked back and forth like he was chewing on words he couldn't quite spit out. My older sister, Emily, scrolled through her phone under the table, pretending nobody noticed. And then there was Grandma. She sat tall despite her age, her silver hair pinned neatly, her piercing blue eyes sharper than any of us gave her credit for. There was something different about her that evening. She wasn't the fragile old woman people often dismissed. She looked like she had a secret, burning at the tip of her tongue. We clinked glasses, exchanged the usual forced pleasantries, and passed around the food. It wasn't until halfway through the meal that Grandma cleared her throat. The sound silenced us instantly. "Sweetheart," she said, her voice carrying effortlessly over the clatter of cutlery. She was looking directly at me. "Enjoy your $9,000 a month." The fork slipped from my hand and clattered onto the plate, splattering gravy across the white tablecloth. "What?" I whispered, sure I had misheard. Emily snorted, quickly covering it with a fake cough. Mom's face drained of color, while Dad shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "You heard me," Grandma said, calm and deliberate. $9,000. Every month. That's yours, darling." For a moment I thought she was joking, some twisted attempt at humor. But her eyes didn't waver. My stomach twisted as heat crawled up my neck. I don't understand," I stammered. "What money?" The room went unnervingly quiet. Even Emily looked up from her phone now, her smirk fading. Mom jumped in first, her tone dripping with forced cheer. "Mother, honestly, must you bring up such confusing matters during Christmas dinner? Let's not ruin the evening with talk of money." But Grandma didn't blink. "No," she said sharply. It's time she knew. My pulse thundered. In my ears. Knew what? I wanted to demand, but the fear of the answer kept my mouth dry. Dad set down his fork with a loud clink. "This isn't the right moment." Grandma turned her gaze on him, icy and unyielding. "If not now, then when? She's been left in the dark long enough." "Left in the dark about what?" My voice cracked, louder than I meant. I hated how small I sounded, like a child at the mercy of adults playing some cruel game. Grandma sighed, as though she'd been carrying the weight of this secret for too long. "Your grandfather set up a trust fund before he passed. It was meant for you, my dear. Every month, $9,000 deposited directly into your account. That was his final gift to ensure you never struggled, no matter what life threw your way." The world tilted. My grandfather, who I adored, who died when I was just 16, had always been kind to me in ways my parents weren't. He taught me how to ride a bike, slipped me chocolate when Mom insisted on kale, and whispered stories about courage when I cried myself to sleep. And now I was being told he had left me not just memories but a fortune? I don't... My throat tightened. "I never got anything." That was when Emily spoke up, her voice sweet with venom. "Of course you didn't, because you're too irresponsible to handle money like that." Emily. Grandma snapped, her voice cracking like a whip. But it was too late. My heart sank as the pieces began to click together. Emily's designer handbags, her constant vacations, her shiny new car last summer that she brushed off as a good deal. Suddenly, it all made sense. I looked at her, my voice trembling. "You knew, didn't you? You've been getting it." Her smirk returned, but it was shaky now, her confidence flickering like a candle in the wind. "Don't be ridiculous." "Enough lies." Grandma's fist hit the table, rattling the wine glasses. Her face was flushed, her eyes blazing. "Your parents have been taking what doesn't belong to them. They've been stealing from their own daughter." The words sliced through me like shards of glass. I turned to Mom and Dad, desperate for them to deny it, to tell me Grandma was mistaken. But Mom avoided my eyes. Her lips pressed tight, and Dad just rubbed his temple like the weight of it was finally catching up to him. "So it's true," I whispered. Nobody spoke. The only sound was the crackle of the fireplace and the distant carolers outside, their cheerful voices a cruel contrast to the chaos inside. The betrayal crashed over me, cold and merciless. For years I had worked 2 jobs just to scrape by, skipped meals to save on groceries, patched up secondhand clothes. And all the while, $9,000 a month, money meant for me, was being stolen by the very people who were supposed to protect me. Tears burned my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. Instead, I pushed back from the table, the legs of my chair screeching against the hardwood floor. "I can't do this," I muttered, my voice shaking. "Sit down," Mom said quickly, panic flaring in, her tone. But Grandma's voice cut through hers, steady and commanding. "No, let her go. She deserves time to think." I stumbled into the hallway, the laughter of past Christmases echoing cruelly in my memory. My grandfather's face floated in my mind, kind and warm, and for the first time, I felt the weight of his absence like a knife twisting in my chest. They stole from me. From him. I paused at the bottom of the staircase, my hands trembling. Behind me? The voices rose again, harsh and accusing. Emily's shrill protests, Dad's booming anger, Mom's frantic attempts to control the narrative. But Grandma stayed silent. It was then I realized she hadn't just dropped a bomb. She'd lit the fuse to something much bigger, and I wasn't going to let it end here. Not anymore. I didn't sleep that night. The snow outside had thickened into a blizzard, but even the muffled hush of winter couldn't silence the storm raging in my head. I sat on the edge of my bed, clutching the quilt Grandma had sewn for me when I was little. My phone buzzed endlessly, texts from Emily that shifted from smug insults to nervous justifications, missed calls from Mom, one terse message from Dad that simply read, "Don't make a scene," but I ignored them all. My mind replayed every word Grandma had spoken, every guilty glance my parents shared, every flash of mockery in Emily's eyes. A trust fund. $9,000 a month. I should have felt relief, security, freedom, but instead I felt hollow. Because if Grandma was right, then my parents hadn't just kept a secret. They had robbed me blind. By dawn, the decision was made. I needed the truth. The next morning, I found Grandma in her study. She was sipping tea by the window, the golden morning light catching the lines of her face. For the first time, I noticed how tired she looked as though years of silence had worn her down. "You didn't sleep either," she said softly, not looking up. I shook my head. "I need to know everything. Please." She set down her cup with a sigh, folding her hands neatly in her lap. "Your grandfather loved you more than life itself. When he was diagnosed, he knew time was short, so he wrote his will and created a trust in your name. 9,000 a month, enough to give you independence. It was his way of making sure you'd never be at their mercy." Their mercy? The word stung. She didn't need to explain who they were. Then why? My voice broke. I swallowed hard. "Why didn't I get any of it?" Her eyes darkened. "Because your parents intervened. They convinced the executor, the family lawyer, who has always been far too loyal to your father, that you weren't mature enough to handle such responsibility. They argued that it would be better managed through them until you were older. I protested, but..." She trailed off, shaking her head. My stomach twisted. "So they lied. They stole it." "Yes." Her voice was sharp, but her hands trembled as she spoke. "They siphoned the money under the guise of managing it for you. And your sister, well, she reaped the benefits. Designer clothes, trips, luxuries you could never afford. All paid for with what was rightfully yours." The room spun. My own parents. My own blood. All those nights I cried over bills, working, double shifts, eating ramen while Emily flaunted her designer heels. I wasn't unlucky. I was betrayed. I pressed my palms to my eyes, fighting back tears. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Grandma's silence was heavy. Then she said, "Because I needed to be sure you were strong enough to face it. If I had told you at 16, grief-stricken and vulnerable, they would have twisted it against you. They're masters at manipulation. But now..." She leaned forward, her eyes blazing with a fierceness that startled me. "Now you're ready. I saw it in your face last night. You won't let them break you." Her words were both a comfort and a curse. Ready? Maybe, but anger alone wouldn't be enough. I needed proof. The following week, I began digging. It started small. Late nights on my laptop, sifting through online public records, legal databases, financial filings. Grandma helped where she could, slipping me old documents and contacts. But what I uncovered made my stomach churn. The will, the trust, the executor's name, Mr. Harrison, the same man who had attended every Christmas and Thanksgiving for as long as I could remember. He was practically family. Of course he'd side with Dad, but the numbers, bank statements that didn't add up. Transfers from the trust into an account labeled under family expenses, but the purchases told a different story. Airline, tickets, jewelry. Emily's tuition at a private college I'd been told was covered by a scholarship. My chest burned as I read line after line. I could almost hear my grandfather's disappointment from beyond the grave. The betrayal wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate, coordinated. Years of lies stacked neatly like a house of cards, all built on the foundation of my grandfather's generosity. And I had been the fool, scraping pennies while my family stole my inheritance right under my nose. The breaking point came one evening when Emily showed up at my apartment. She leaned against the doorframe in her fur-lined coat, her lips painted in a smug red. "So," she drawled, "Grandma spilled the beans, huh?" I clenched the door tighter, resisting the urge to slam it in her face. "You knew. you've known all along." Her smile was sharp. "Of course I did. And honestly, it's better this way." "Do you really think you could have handled that kind of money? You can barely handle your life." My vision blurred with rage. "That money was mine. Grandpa wanted me to have it." She laughed, the sound like nails on glass. "Grandpa isn't here anymore, is he? And newsflash, life isn't fair. You should thank us, actually. We made sure it wasn't wasted on your sad little existence." Something inside me snapped. I stepped forward, my voice low and steady, though my hands shook. "Get out. And listen carefully, Emily. I'm going to expose every single one of you. Every stolen dollar, every forged document. I'll make sure the whole world knows what you did." For the first time, her smirk faltered. Just a flicker, but enough. "You wouldn't dare," she hissed. I slammed the door in her face. That night, I sat with Grandma in her study again. She listened silently as I recounted the confrontation, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she placed her hand gently over mine. "Good," she said firmly. "Let them feel fear for once. But threats aren't enough. We need evidence, solid proof, something they can't twist or bury." Her words lit a spark inside me. This wasn't just about reclaiming the money anymore. This was about justice. For me, for my grandfather, for every year they had stolen. I looked at her, the fire in my chest reflected in her sharp blue eyes. "Then let's get it. Let's take them down." Grandma's lips curved into a thin, knowing smile. That's exactly what I was waiting to hear. In that moment, the path was clear. They had taken everything from me. But now, I was going to take it back. And I wasn't stopping until every lie, every theft, every betrayal was dragged into the light. And when the truth came out, they wouldn't just lose the money. They'd lose me. The following Sunday, I went back to my parents' house. It wasn't out of love or obligation. I wanted answers. And if they weren't going to hand me the truth willingly, I was prepared to pry it out of them. The house looked the same as always. The wreath on the door perfectly centered, the porch light glowing warmly against the winter chill. But stepping inside felt different now. Every family photo on the wall, every piece of furniture suddenly looked like props on a stage, a carefully crafted illusion. Mom greeted me in the foyer with a brittle smile. "I was hoping you'd come to your senses." I dropped my coat over the chair and met her gaze. "I didn't come to make peace. I came for the truth." Her smile faltered. "Truth about what?" "Don't play dumb." My voice was sharper than I intended, but I didn't care. "The trust fund, the money. Grandpa left me, the years of lies." Her jaw tightened, but before she could speak, Dad appeared from the kitchen. His voice was calm, almost rehearsed. "We did what was best for you. You were too young, too naive to handle that kind of responsibility." I laughed bitterly. "Too young? I've been working myself into the ground while you've been living off my inheritance. Don't pretend this was some noble sacrifice." Emily strolled in then, sipping from a sparkling water bottle like she was watching a play unfold. "Honestly, you should be thanking us. Imagine what a disaster you'd be if you had money. At least this way, it went to good use." I turned on her, my blood boiling. "Good use? You mean your shopping sprees, your vacations, your luxury? Apartment. That wasn't yours to take, Emily. It was mine." She smirked, but I saw the flicker of unease in her eyes. Mom stepped between us, her voice rising. Enough. We are your parents. We've sacrificed everything for you: food, shelter, education. Don't you dare stand there and accuse us of theft. My hands curled into fists. Sacrifice? You didn't sacrifice. You stole. I found the transfers. I saw the statements. You used forged signatures to move the money. The color drained from Dad's face. You don't know what you're talking about. Oh, I do. I pulled a folder from my bag and slammed it onto the table. Inside were the copies Grandma and I had gathered: bank transfers, records of purchases, legal filings. And there, in black and white, were signatures. My name scrawled at the bottom of authorizations I had never signed. Emily's smirk evaporated. Mom's hands trembled. Dad's face turned ashen. You forged my signature, I said, my voice low and dangerous. You pretended I authorized the withdrawals. You lied to the lawyer. You lied to me. For years. Silence pressed down like a weight. The only sound was the faint tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Finally, Dad's voice cracked. We didn't have a choice. Your grandfather put too much power in your hands. We couldn't trust you. I stared at him. Disbelief, cutting deeper than anger. You couldn't trust me. I was a kid who adored you, who would have believed anything you said. And instead of guiding me, you stole from me. You betrayed Grandpa's final wish. You betrayed me. Mom's eyes glistened with tears, but her words were ice. We did it to protect you. Money changes people. It ruins families. I shook my head. No, Mom. Greed ruins families. And you proved it. Emily slammed her water bottle onto the counter. Oh, stop being so dramatic. You act like you're some victim, but you had food, a roof, clothes. I cut her off. Don't you dare minimize what you did. I starved myself to pay bills while you strutted around in $1,000 shoes bought with my money. You're not my sister. You're a parasite. Her face twisted in rage. You think you're better than me now? You're nothing without that money. Nothing. The venom in her voice nearly broke me, but instead, it steeled my resolve. I turned back to my parents. Do you even realize what you've done? Forging my signature, misappropriating funds. It's not just betrayal. It's fraud. It's a crime. Dad's fists clenched. Don't threaten us. I'm not threatening, I said coldly. I'm promising. Unless you come clean, unless you admit everything, I'll take this to the authorities. And then you won't just lose the money, you'll lose your freedom. The air crackled with tension. Mom's lips trembled, but she didn't speak. Dad's face hardened into stone. Emily looked between them, panic creeping into her eyes, and then Grandma's voice rang out from the doorway. She's right. We all spun around. I hadn't realized she'd followed me here, but there she was, standing tall, her cane tapping against the floor as she entered the room. Her presence was like a blade cutting through the fog. I warned you, she said, her voice sharp and clear. I told you not to meddle with his will, but you couldn't resist, could you? You thought you could twist the truth, line your pockets, and no one would notice. Well, I noticed, and now she knows too. Mom's tears spilled over. Mother, please, no! Grandma's cane slammed against the floor, making us all flinch. Don't you dare plead with me! You dishonored your father's dying wish. You robbed your own daughter. And you dragged Emily into your corruption, teaching her deceit instead of integrity. Emily opened her mouth to protest, but one look from Grandma silenced her. I stood, there, my chest heaving, my world tilting on its axis. For so long, I had felt powerless in this family. But in that moment, with Grandma by my side and the truth laid bare, I felt something new. Strength. "I won't be your pawn anymore," I said firmly. "You've controlled me for the last time." Dad's face darkened, his voice low and threatening. "Be careful what you say. Families don't survive this kind of betrayal." I met his gaze without flinching. Then maybe this family doesn't deserve to survive. That night, I returned to my apartment, the folder of evidence clutched to my chest like a weapon. Grandma stayed with me, her presence a steady anchor in the chaos. "You did well," she said as we sat in the quiet living room. "But this is only the beginning. They won't back down easily. They'll lie, manipulate, twist everything to their advantage." I looked at the papers, my stomach tight with both fear and determination. "Then we'll outplay them. We'll build a case so strong they can't wriggle free." Her eyes gleamed with pride. "That's exactly what your grandfather would have wanted." I leaned back, exhaustion settling into my bones. But beneath it, a fire burned brighter than ever. They had built a web of lies to trap me. But now, I was ready to tear it apart. The snow outside had started to melt, leaving behind slushy streets and gray skies. It was the kind of weather that matched my mood. Messy, heavy, and unforgiving. Days had passed since the confrontation at my parents' house, but the fury still simmered in me like a fever I couldn't shake. They had stolen my inheritance, lied to my face, and tried to gaslight me into believing it was all for my own good. If they thought I was going to let it go, they didn't know me at all. Grandma and I sat in her study, the table between us covered in papers, bank statements, photocopies of forged signatures, and transcripts of emails we'd managed to dig up from old accounts. A lamp glowed overhead, casting a warm pool of light onto the evidence of their betrayal. Grandma adjusted her glasses and tapped one of the documents with her finger. "This shows the first transfer, 2 weeks after your grandfather passed. They wasted no time." My stomach tightened. "They didn't even let him rest." She gave a grim nod. "Greed rarely waits for morning." I leaned back, rubbing my temples. "We have evidence, but will it hold? They'll twist everything, just like they always do." "That's why we need more than paper." Her eyes gleamed with determination. "We need witnesses. People they can't silence or discredit." Her words planted a seed in my mind. There were others who had seen pieces of the puzzle over the years. Mr. Harrison, the lawyer who had drafted the trust, Aunt Carol, who once drunkenly hinted at secrets in the will, even Emily's so-called friends, who bragged about her mystery allowance. If I could connect those threads, I could weave a noose around their lies. The first step was Mr. Harrison. I called his office and booked an appointment under the guise of reviewing family documents. He greeted me with his usual stiff politeness, but when I mentioned the trust, his eyes flickered nervously. I don't think there's much to discuss," he stammered, shuffling papers on his desk. "Your parents have handled everything appropriately." Appropriately? I leaned forward, lowering my voice. "Is forging my signature appropriate? Is funneling my inheritance into their own pockets appropriate?" His face went pale. I can't." "Listen to me." My voice trembled with both rage and control. "I have the documents. I know what they did. If you cooperate, you'll just be a witness. If you don't, you'll be an accomplice." The silence stretched, broken only by the ticking clock on his wall. Finally, he sighed, slumping back in his chair. I tried to protest. I really did. But your father, he was persuasive. He insisted it was temporary, that it was for your benefit. He said you weren't ready. I clenched my fists. And you believed him? He wouldn't meet my eyes. I wanted to. I owed him favors. But yes, I knew what he was doing. And I know it was wrong. It wasn't everything I needed, but it was enough. His testimony could tear holes in their defense. Next, Aunt Carol. She was the black sheep of the family, always a little too honest after a few glasses of wine. When I visited her small apartment, she didn't even try to hide her resentment toward my parents. "Oh, I knew something was fishy the moment your grandfather's will was read," she said, waving her cigarette dramatically. "He was clear about leaving that money for you. But your parents, well, they made it seem like you weren't ready. And you know me. I don't buy into their holier-than-thou act." I pressed gently. "Would you be willing to say that officially? Maybe even in writing?" She snorted. "Honey, I'd testify in court if it meant knocking them off their high horses." A smile tugged at my lips. Piece by piece, the trap was coming together. But I needed more than testimonies. I needed undeniable proof, something that would silence their excuses once and for all. That's when Grandma suggested it. "You know they'll deny everything," she said one evening, her voice sharp with experience. "They'll twist words, cry crocodile tears, make themselves the victims. So what you need is to catch them in the act." My brow furrowed. "In the act?" She leaned closer, her eyes narrowing. "We lure them into admitting it, record their words, make them confess with their own mouths." The idea sent a shiver down my spine. Risky, dangerous, but brilliant. And I knew exactly how to do it. The opportunity came quicker than expected. Emily texted me a few days later. "We need to talk. Family dinner. Be there." I almost laughed. A family dinner? After everything? But then I realized it was the perfect stage. I told Grandma, and she simply nodded. "Good. Then that's where we set the trap." On the night of the dinner, I slipped a tiny recorder into my pocket. My heart pounded with every step toward the house, but I forced myself to stay calm. The atmosphere inside was strained. Dad sat stiffly at the head of the table, Mom beside him with her lips pursed, Emily scrolling on her phone as if none of this mattered. We exchanged cold greetings and began eating in silence. Finally, Dad cleared his throat. "We need to put this nonsense to rest. You're blowing things out of proportion." I set down my fork slowly. "Out of proportion? You forged my signature, stole from my trust, and lied to me for years. How exactly am I exaggerating?" Emily rolled her eyes. "You don't get it. We were just protecting you. You would have wasted the money." I felt the recorder pressing against my leg like a weapon. "Protecting me? Or protecting yourselves? Admit it. You used it for yourselves." Mom's voice cracked. "We had no choice. The bills, Emily's tuition." "There it is," I interrupted, my pulse racing. "You admit it. You used my inheritance." The silence was deafening. Dad slammed his hand on the table. "Fine. Yes, we used it. But we deserved it after everything we've done for you." My breath caught. There it was, the confession. Raw, undeniable, recorded. I forced my expression to stay neutral, though inside I was trembling with victory. "Thank you. I said softly. That's all I needed to hear. They exchanged uneasy glances, realizing too late that they had walked straight into the snare. Grandma, who had sat quietly until then, finally spoke. You'll regret underestimating her. When I left that night, the recorder burned hot in my pocket, heavy with their words. I walked into the cold winter air with a new fire in my chest. The trap was set. The evidence was mine. They thought they had outsmarted me, that I'd always be their obedient, powerless daughter. But soon, the entire world would know the truth. And when their lies unraveled, there would be no web left to hide in. The night of the New Year's Eve party arrived like a storm ready to break. The house was filled with extended family, friends, and distant relatives, all oblivious to the undercurrent of tension brewing beneath the glittering chandeliers and the clinking of champagne glasses. I stood in the corner of the grand living room, dressed in black, my hair pinned back, and my eyes sharp, calculating. In my pocket, the recorder burned against my thigh like a live wire, a quiet promise of justice. Grandma was beside me, her presence steady, her gaze proud. She had arranged the seating, subtly orchestrated the gathering so that every key player would be within reach of the truth, and now we were moments away from striking. Emily flitted around, laughing and sipping champagne, completely unaware of the storm about to descend. Mom and Dad sat near the fireplace, pretending to engage in polite conversation with Aunt Carol and Uncle Greg, though I could see the tension in their tight jaws and nervous glances. I took a deep breath. Tonight, it would all end. The party began, with the usual festivities, laughter, music, and the countdown clock ticking relentlessly toward midnight. But I was focused entirely on my target. Grandma gave me a subtle nod. That was my cue. I stepped forward, clearing my throat. The room fell silent, some heads turning in curiosity. I have an announcement, I said, my voice steady, carrying over the chatter. Something that has been kept from me for far too long. A few eyebrows rose. Emily froze mid-laugh, her phone dropping unnoticed to the floor. Mom and Dad exchanged panicked glances. I raised my hand to silence the murmurs. Grandma told me the truth about my grandfather's trust fund. $9,000 a month, set aside for me. And for years, my own parents have stolen that money, forging my signature, lying, and pretending it was for my benefit. The room fell into stunned silence. Drinks trembled in hands, and a fork clattered against a plate. Mom's face went pale. That's not... Stop, I said, my tone sharp. Tonight I have the proof. Every transaction, every stolen dollar, every lie you told me and the lawyer, recorded and documented. I pulled out the recorder and hit play. Dad's voice, Mom's murmuring justifications, Emily's attempts to defend herself. It all played, clearly over the room, undeniable and humiliating. The reactions were instantaneous. Gasps, whispers, and stunned expressions rippled through the room. Some relatives covered their mouths in shock. Aunt Carol's eyes sparkled with satisfaction, and Grandma stood behind me, a triumphant smile tugging at her lips. Emily's face twisted with panic. You can't? I already did, I said calmly. Every word, every admission. And it's not just me. Any lawyer would tell you this is fraud. This is theft. And tonight, the world knows what you are. Mom's shoulders slumped, tears streaming down her face. Please, we didn't... You didn't what? I cut her off. Protect me? Steal from me? Lie to me? Admit it. Admit that you violated Grandpa's wishes, that you enriched yourselves at my expense, and that you manipulated your own daughter? Dad opened his mouth, but no words came. He looked smaller than he had in years, shrinking under the weight of exposure. Grandma stepped forward, her voice steady and commanding. Your arrogance has finally caught up with you. For years you thought your lies would remain hidden. For years you thought she would remain obedient, grateful, and silent. But that is over. The trust fund is hers. The money you stole, it will be returned with interest if necessary, and your attempts to control her life will end tonight. The room was electric with tension. Some relatives looked at Mom and Dad with shock and disbelief. Others whispered about the courage it must have taken for me to confront them publicly. Emily collapsed onto a nearby chair, her head in her hands. I didn't know it would— You knew, I said sharply, and now you will face the consequences of your choices. I felt a sense of liberation washing over me. For years they had controlled my life, manipulated me, and kept me in the dark. But now the tables had turned. I wasn't just reclaiming what was mine. I was exposing the rot beneath the family facade. Grandma put a hand on my shoulder. This is just the beginning, she said. You've struck the first blow. But remember, the key to real revenge isn't destruction. It's control. And now you have it. I nodded, letting the weight of her words sink in. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Some relatives expressed their shock and sympathy. Others whispered behind hands, gossiping about the scandalous revelation. Mom and Dad avoided eye contact with anyone, humiliated and powerless. Emily tried to slip away unnoticed, but Aunt Carol cornered her with a sharp glare that made her tremble. I felt a mixture of satisfaction and disbelief. It was finally over. Or at least the first chapter of justice was complete. Later, when the party had dwindled and the last guests had left, I sat in the quiet of the living room with Grandma. The champagne glasses glimmered in the soft light, remnants of the party scattered like confetti around us. You did well, she said, her voice soft but proud. You turned their lies into their downfall. But now you have a choice. Let them crawl back into their shadows or cut them out of your life completely. I thought about Dad, desperate to regain control, Mom, weeping for sympathy that wouldn't come, and Emily, who had treated me as a rival rather than a sister. My heart hardened. They won't control me anymore, I said firmly. I've given them enough chances. From now on, they're out of my life. Grandma nodded approvingly. Then it's done. You've reclaimed your power. And soon, you'll reclaim your life entirely. I smiled, feeling the weight of years of manipulation lifting off my shoulders. The anger that had driven me for so long now felt tempered with clarity. They had stolen from me, lied to me, and humiliated me, but they would never take my future. And as the first fireworks of the new year lit up the sky outside, I felt a sense of triumph that no money alone could buy. The web of lies had been torn apart, and I had emerged victorious. The new year had dawned crisp and bright, casting a pale winter light across the city. The night's fireworks had faded into memory, leaving the streets glistening with frost and quiet triumph. Inside my apartment, the sense of liberation I had imagined for so long finally settled over me like a warm blanket. Grandma had stayed with me through the night, helping me process the whirlwind of emotions. Her wisdom, as always, had been the steadying force I needed. You did what had to be done, she said, handing me a cup of tea. And now, the next step is yours. You've reclaimed your inheritance, but you also have the power to shape your life as you see fit. I sipped the tea, savoring the warmth. For years, I had lived under the shadow of my parents' manipulation, the subtle and not-so-subtle betrayals that had kept me powerless. Now, that shadow had lifted. The fallout was immediate. Within days, Dad's and Mom's financial dealings were under scrutiny. They had not only siphoned money from my trust fund, but they had also mismanaged other family accounts. The lawyer we had worked with, Mr. Harrison, testified openly, corroborating every transfer, every forged signature. Emily's indulgences and luxuries, previously hidden, were documented and traced directly to the money they had stolen. The media didn't know it yet, and I intended to keep it that way. This was personal justice, not a spectacle. But the humiliation they faced was devastating. The parents who had once wielded control like armor now faced creditors, legal scrutiny, and social isolation. They could no longer manipulate, gaslight, or threaten me, and Emily, my sister, was left to confront the consequences of being complicit. She had enjoyed luxuries at my expense, but when stripped of them, she was forced to reckon with the emptiness of her victories. Despite the chaos I had caused in my family, I didn't feel guilt. I felt clarity. Grandma and I spent the next few weeks consolidating the remaining funds, setting up investments, and securing a life for me that was untouchable by the toxic influence of my family. With every decision I made, I felt the weight of my grandfather's legacy, not just in money, but in the responsibility and courage he had entrusted to me. I wasn't just reclaiming an inheritance. I was reclaiming the life that had been stolen from me. One afternoon, as I sorted through documents and planned a charitable donation in my grandfather's name, Grandma approached with a wry smile. "You know," she said, "I orchestrated more than just the trap for your parents." I looked up, puzzled. "What do you mean?" She leaned on her cane, her eyes sparkling with mischief and wisdom. "That Christmas dinner, the one where I told you about the trust fund, I did it on purpose. I wanted to see how you would react. Would you freeze? Would you crumble? Or would you rise?" I felt my jaw drop. You tested me?" She nodded. "Yes. I needed to know if you had the strength to face betrayal, to confront lies, and to fight for what was yours. And you passed, brilliantly." The enormity of her words sank in. All the fear, rage, and determination I had felt. It had been the proving ground I hadn't realized existed. With my family removed from the picture, I began to rebuild my life on my own terms. I invested in my education, finally pursuing the degree I had put off while working endless hours just to survive. I traveled to places I had dreamed of, discovering beauty and inspiration beyond my previous constraints. I used part of my inheritance to help those who had struggled, like I once had, ensuring that my grandfather's generosity extended beyond myself. The freedom was intoxicating. Every decision, every small joy, felt like a victory. And yet, I never lost sight of the lessons I had learned. Greed, betrayal, and manipulation could poison even the most loving bonds. But courage, integrity, and determination could carve a path to redemption and empowerment. Months later, I received a call from Aunt Carol. They're trying to reconcile," she said, voice hesitant. "Mom, Dad, Emily, they're begging for forgiveness." I smiled faintly, a mixture of pity and satisfaction washing over me. "Let them beg. I've moved on. I'm building something better, and their apologies won't change the past. Grandma, overhearing my words, chuckled. Wise choice. Forgiveness is for your peace, not theirs. Don't let them manipulate your heart again. I nodded. She was right. The family I was born into had failed me, but the family I had chosen, the one that included my grandfather's legacy and Grandma's unwavering guidance, was stronger, wiser, and untainted. Even as life stabilized, the memory of betrayal lingered, like a shadow. It reminded me of the cost of naivety and the power of awareness. I had learned that love could be manipulated, trust could be weaponized, and appearances could deceive. But I had also learned that courage, intelligence, and persistence could turn the tide against even the most formidable opposition. And I had learned the most important lesson of all. No one, not even family, had the right to steal my life. On a crisp winter morning, a year after the public unmasking, I stood on the balcony of my newly purchased apartment. The city sprawled beneath me in a glittering mosaic of lights and possibilities. Grandma was beside me, sipping tea and gazing at the horizon. "You've done well," she said softly, her eyes shining, more than I ever imagined. I smiled, feeling the weight of the past lift completely. We did it together, and now it's truly over. Grandma's hand rested on my shoulder, firm and reassuring. Yes, it's over. But remember, my dear, always protect your heart, your mind, and your future. Trust wisely, and never forget what you've learned. I nodded, looking out at the endless horizon. The world was vast, filled with challenges, yes, but also opportunity. And for the first time in my life, I felt completely free. Free from betrayal. Free from lies. Free to live a life of my own making. The past had been cruel, but the future, my future, was mine, and I intended to make it spectacular.